Hi everyone, my name is Matt, and welcome to my channel. I bought this box of river trolls way back in 2012, and needless to say, they sat in my pile of shame for a long time. But now that the old world is here, I figured it's about time I tackled them. So grab your brushes, and let's get started. After assembling the model, I primed it with my favorite method, beginning with a gray primer all over, followed by a heavy spray of white from the top and sides. I want to paint the models a little more vibrant than the box art, and they have a yellowish belly and it blends to green everywhere else. We'll start off with Aggaros dunes. I'm beginning on one side, and after laying down the first section of paint, I rinsed my brush, wiped it on a paper towel, and then blended out the edge. Since this is one big area, I have to work fast if I want a smooth finish. Then I worked my way over to the other side and repeated the same blending process. Check for any areas the paint has pooled too much and use the brush to soak up any excess. Then I moved on to the neck and finally the face. Next, I painted the rest of the body with Mantis Warrior's green. I want the green to overlap the last layer slightly, so I rinsed the brush and blended out the paint just like before. I worked my way around the model and painted all the remaining skin. This color is more forgiving than some of the other contrast paints, so you don't have to go as fast with it. I want to add a little more depth to the yellow, so I painted another layer on the belly, this time with Nazdreg yellow. I blended out the edges just like before, working on one section at a time, rinsing the brush, wiping it on a paper towel, and then softening the edge. The green skin needs more depth now, so I painted a layer of Creed Camo over the top of it. This is a much stronger color than the others so far, and it's a lot less forgiving, which means mistakes will show up easier, so it's important to get the blending as smooth as possible. I used the same technique on the edge where it blends to the yellow. Just paint a small section at a time, rinse the brush, wipe it on a paper towel, and then blend out the edge. Next I made a mix of equal parts Creed Camo and Black Templar, and I painted the scales. After the first layer dried, I painted a second to deepen the color. Now's a great time for me to ask you to do those YouTube things that we all love so much. If you're liking the video so far, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future content. If you really like what I'm doing here and you want to support the channel further, consider being a channel member. We have some perks including a Discord server and early access to videos. Next I painted some Terradon turquoise around the eyes. This color is really strong, so make sure to use a small amount and then blend it out carefully. I painted all the hair next with Stormvermin fur. There's a lot of green paint on the hair from the previous layers, and if I wanted to use a contrast paint, I'd have to touch it up with white first. It'll be much faster and easier to just base coat it with an opaque paint instead. Once all the hair dried, I shaded it with black Templar. With the black Templar still on my palette, I painted a thin black line around all the remaining details. This is often called black lining. When black lining, I like to turn the model as needed and angle the brush in a way to get the paint exactly where it needs to go, even if it comes at the expense of getting some black on an unpainted area. Since everything else will be painted with opaque paint, spills won't matter anyway. Next I painted the ears, webbing on the feet, and sections of the head crest with Cadian Fleshtone, making sure to leave a thin black line along the edges. When that layer dried, I painted a second for an even finish. Then I shaded those areas with Carroburg Crimson. After the wash dried, I painted over the ribs on the ears and the head crest with black paint. Next I base coated the wood weapon handle with Steel Legion Drab. After the first coat dried, I painted a second for an even finish. Then I shaded the wood with Ratling Grime. I painted the teeth, claws, horns, and the rope with Zandri dust. After the Zandri dust dried, I shaded the rope with Aggaros dunes. I painted the vine with Deathworld Forest. Then I shaded it with a wash of Athonian Camo shade. I base coated the stone with gray number 4 from my custom grayscale, and you can learn how to make your own set here. If you don't feel like mixing anything, Dawnstone is a close match. I also painted these growths and warts with the gray. Then I shaded the stone with an equal parts mix of Aggaros Earthshade and Nuln Oil. At this stage you could base the model and call it finished, but we'll move on and do some highlights. First I want to start out with a couple glazes to even out the skin. Balor Brown is a pretty close match to the yellow sections. I thinned down the paint with about equal parts water, and with barely any paint on the brush, I painted a thin layer over most of the raised edges and over any imperfections. A glaze isn't completely necessary, but I feel it makes a difference on larger areas without much texture. Next I painted a glaze over the green portions of the skin with Warboss Green. This color isn't an exact match, but it's close enough. I thinned the paint with an equal amount of water, and I used the same glazing process over the green. Contrast paint can leave an uneven finish. Some areas are lighter, and some areas are darker. A glaze like this is semi-transparent, and it tints the layers beneath it, reducing the appearance of uneven tones and making the surface appear smoother. With the glazes applied, now it's time to start edge highlights. I picked out the edges on the stomach with Ungor flesh, and I stopped the lines where the flesh starts to turn green. We'll cover that area later. Next I painted all the edges of the green skin with Skarsnik green. And just like the last layer, I stopped the highlights where the skin starts to turn yellow. This is a very stylized way of highlighting, and where you place the highlights is at your discretion, and everyone will place the highlights differently. You may want a more subtle, softer kind of highlight, or you may want something sharper and more extreme than I'm doing here. It's entirely up to you, and there's really no wrong way to do it. And finally on the section where the green blends to yellow, I painted a highlight with Ogryn Camo. I picked out some of the edges of the hair with Stormvermin fur. Next I highlighted the edges of the scales with Thunderhawk blue, as well as the ribs on the ears and the head crest. This step can be kinda time consuming, and you could highlight as many or as few of the scales as you want. You could also leave them the dark green color and they'd look good too. I want to highlight some of the scales one more time, so I thinned down some Fenrisian gray and I painted the corners. I focused on the most visible areas, the top sections of the model, and the cheeks. Next I moved on to the eyes. I started off by highlighting the eyelids and the skin around the eyes with Baharroth blue. Normally I would paint the eyes black first, but they got dark enough from the turquoise shade earlier, so I went straight into base coating them with toxic yellow, making sure to leave a dark outline around the eye. Then I painted the pupils with black. And after that dried, I added a tiny reflection with white. Next I highlighted all the claws and teeth with Bonewhite. I like to paint a few grooves along the length of each. Then I picked out the very edges and corners with Offwhite. I dry brushed the stone with gray number 4 from my custom gray scale. If you don't feel like mixing it, Dawnstone is a close match. Then I dry brushed the stone with gray Seer. While I had the gray Seer on my palette, I also picked out all of the gray boils. Next I highlighted the webbing with Cadian Fleshtone. Then I picked out the edges with Flayed 1 Flesh. I highlighted the edges of the vine with Ogryn Camo. And finally I painted some of the wood grain with Baneblade Brown. I used an old brush to apply a generous layer of wood glue to the base. Then I sprinkled on some coarse gravel and fine sand. After the glue dried, I painted the base with a layer of thinned Rhinox hide, followed by a dry brush of Steel Legion Drab. I painted the rocks with Dawnstone, and shaded them with a mix of Agrax Earthshade and Nuln Oil. I painted the edge of the base with Rhinox hide, and after that dried, I applied patches of static grass with superglue. I'd like to give a big shout out to our channel members. Thank you so much for your support, and I can't wait to put it to good use. If you want to be like these amazing people and help support what I'm doing here, just click the join button down below. Thank you. This troll was a nice change of pace from some of the other things I've been working on. I like the brighter colors compared to the box art. Brighter colors just feel more old world to me, I guess. I have a couple more trolls left to paint for this regiment, and I'm leaning towards painting them different. What do you think? Do you like all the models to have some individuality, or should they all be exactly the same? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy painting.